Milei on economic issues. Tariffs. I think Milei agrees with Milton Friedman, who is one of his favorite economists when it comes to tariffs, who said that tariffs are what we do to ourselves in peacetime, what our enemy does to us in times of war. Milei points out that tariffs are a violation of the freedom of association. So why didn't Milei eliminate all tariffs upon entering office? Well, it's because he was worried about the zero budget rule. In other words, a balanced budget. His first priority was balancing the budget, and he didn't want to cut off any sources of revenue until that was accomplished. Milei has repeatedly said if there's a budget surplus, they will cut taxes and tariffs, and as soon as there was a surplus, they very quickly reduced tariffs. In this clip from his speech to Congress, Milei exactly makes this point.
In the same way, we need to give the Argentines the freedom to trade with whoever they want so that goods and services enter the local market and so that everyone can freely buy products of better quality at a better price. For decades, under the promise of protecting a handful of jobs, the cost of living was deliberately increased by millions of Argentines, in many cases forcing them to even acquire goods of dubious quality at completely distorted prices. It is not fair that only those who can afford a trip abroad can buy what they want at an international price. It has to be for everyone. Opening markets will also open the doors of the world to Argentine companies so that they can go out and sell our products to 8 billion people.
In this clip, Milei makes it clear that all Argentinians will benefit by reducing barriers to trade, including producers.
Freeing us from the yoke of the previous trade chains that today suffocate us, in order to be able to export and import goods of better quality at a better price, to be able to exploit our comparative advantages by opening ourselves to almost 200 potentials and new countries that demand all the work that Argentines have to offer, starting a process of economic convergence that will once again situate us in that opposite direction. That is why we are seeking to promote during this year free trade treaty with the United States.
President Milei explains that tariffs were used by the political elites to protect their political friends and enrich them at the expense of all Argentinians. Then he lists a bunch of products that they just lowered the tariffs on.
Exactly 1 year ago, we had an Ethereum system, which was used by a group of kleptomaniacs to collect coins in imports. Today, anyone who wants to import something can do it. Today, we reduced tariffs on more goods, such as herbicides, urea, plastic, pneumatic, home appliances, motorcycles, LED products, and many more, lowering prices and benefiting our entire society through competition.
In this short clip, Milei explains that all tariffs, taxes, and regulations hinder productivity and innovation, and that hurts all Argentinians.
Our function is to be the ones who remove the obstacles in the way, eliminating our regulations, taxes, and tariffs that hinder work, investment, and innovation. This train of progress is already in motion.
But what about Donald Trump's argument that America has opened its markets to everyone, but everyone else has huge tariffs against American goods, and that this is an unfair playing field that has hollowed out American manufacturing and has destroyed our middle class? So according to Trump, by raising tariffs, we'll force manufacturers to come back to the U.S. This will revive the manufacturing base in the U.S. again and create a robust middle class. The hollowing out of the American middle class and destroying the American manufacturing base has nothing to do with the fact that the U.S. federal government has spent trillions upon trillions it doesn't have, about $2 trillion more than it takes in every year. It also has nothing to do with the fact that the U.S. is $33 trillion in debt, about 150% of the GDP. And of course, it's got nothing to do with the absurd number of U.S. federal regulations and laws. I asked Google AI how many regulations there are in the U.S. It didn't know the exact number. This is absurd. The estimates include up to 1 million of them. I also asked Google AI the number of federal laws, and again there was no exact answer, but the estimate was up to 300,000. This makes a complete mockery of the common law maxim that ignorance of the law is no excuse. Of course, these problems have nothing to do with the fact that the Federal Reserve prints money out of thin air. In other words, it counterfeits, and it's a Marxist organization which is designed to destroy property rights and causes the Cantillon effect. It enriches the political class, makes the rich richer, while stealing from the middle class and impoverishing them. It also favors large corporations. This has nothing to do with the reason that the middle class is hollowed out and the American manufacturing base is destroyed. How stupid can you be? The fact that we've destroyed property rights also has nothing to do with hollowing out the middle class and destroying manufacturing in the U.S. For instance, we have civil assets forfeiture laws where the police steal from the people. In fact, the estimates are that the police steal more property than all the thieves in the U.S. combined. In addition, governments, state and local governments are stealing people's houses, as this John Stossel report shows. This grift starts by saying you owe property taxes. Then they take your house to pay for those property taxes, sell it, and they don't return any excess money to you. This is clearly criminal. Another example of how property rights have been destroyed in the U.S. is cities using eminent domain to take someone's property just because they think they can get a bigger tax base if they steal the property and give it to someone else. This absurd ruling was upheld by the Supreme Court, which shows that at least a majority of the judges on the Supreme Court are incompetent and should be impeached. Another case in which the federal government is stealing people's homes and property is by the EPA arguing that puddles are navigable waters and levying absurd fines. A huge problem that no one is talking about that is hollowing out the middle class and our manufacturing industry has to do with the fact that Clinton, Bush II, and Obama destroyed property rights for inventors. Many of our great manufacturing companies were started because an inventor had a patent and he built a production or manufacturing company around it, like GE, Westinghouse, 3M, DuPont, and even Google. Today, we give away our intellectual property rights of our inventors to foreigners for free. And last but not least, of course, this has nothing to do with the moral decay going on in the U.S. This is not about religion. This is about FEMA favoring certain people because of their political point of view. It's about the IRS targeting people for their political point of view, like the Tea Party, and the absurd political prosecutions of the J6 protesters. It's about the fact that the Clintons, who have clearly murdered hundreds of people, have not been prosecuted. If President Trump was serious about restoring the American manufacturing base and helping the middle class, he would tackle these problems instead of the absurd idea of levying punitive tariffs. They're a protectionist idea that do not work, will not restore the American manufacturing base, or help the middle class. This is a complete disaster that the MAGA community has been sucked into. I think we'll end with a clip by Ronald Reagan about tariffs.
You see, at first, when someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports, it looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes for a short while it works, but only for a short time. What eventually occurs is, first, homegrown industries start relying on government protection in the form of high tariffs. They stop competing and stop making the innovative management and technological changes they need to succeed in world markets. And then, while all this is going on, something even worse occurs. High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars. The result is more and more tariffs, higher and higher trade barriers, and less competition. So soon, because of the prices made artificially high by tariffs that subsidize inefficiency and poor management, people stop buying. Then the worst happens. Markets shrink and collapse, businesses and industries shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs. The memory of all this occurring back in the 30s made me determined when I came to Washington to spare the American people the protectionist legislation that destroys prosperity. Now, it hasn't always been easy. There are those in the Congress, just as there were back in the 30s, who want to go for the quick political advantage, who risk America's prosperity for the sake of a short-term appeal to some special interest group, who forget that more than 5 million American jobs are directly tied to the foreign export business, and additional millions are tied to imports. For those of us who lived through the Great Depression, the memory of the suffering it caused is deep and searing. And today, many economic analysts and historians argue that high tariff legislation passed back in that period, called the Smoot-Hawley Tariff, greatly deepened the Depression and prevented economic recovery.
Long live freedom, damn it.